Hello, and welcome to Psychology 346, Social Psychology. And today we're going to be talking about what is social psychology. So, the primary objective of social psychology is to explain human behavior. It's a scientific study of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors of individuals in social situations. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're studying people interacting with others. It can also include the actual imagined or implied presence of others. So social psychological research can apply to a wide variety of situations. When we talk about social psychology, we have three main objectives. We want to understand people's feelings, people's thoughts, and people's behaviors, and why people have these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So we may ask the question, right, why do people feel the way they do? We may specifically focus on why people have certain feelings towards others. For example, some research suggests that people who have power over others tend to infer more sexual interest from them, or tend to feel more sexually interested in them compared to individuals who are subordinate to others. We may ask the question, why do people think the way they do? We may examine research on why people or how people think about likelihoods of events occurring. So, for example, research has found that people think that they'll be eaten by a shark before that they will die from getting hit with sports equipment. So they think they're more likely to get eaten by a shark and die that way than to die from a tackle from someone. Even though dying from getting hit with sports equipment, getting tackled, is 7 times more likely than getting eaten by a shark. So why do people think like this? Well, we'll talk about that sometime this quarter. And lastly, we want to examine, why do people behave the way they do? How can we predict behaviors? Do certain groups of people, for example, behave in certain ways compared to others? We may examine the question, are men more aggressive than women? And if so, why are men more aggressive than women? So these are some of the questions that we're going to be addressing over the course of the quarter. And things aren't always as they seem. Certain understandings that we have of the world may not be that obvious. The true nature of how we interact with others may not be as obvious as we think it is. So, for example, I might present to you what you might think is a somewhat obvious finding, that opposites attract in terms of romantic relationships. Well, that's not actually true. Typically what we see is maybe somewhat counterintuitive, maybe not, is that birds of a feather tend to flock together. We tend to see that individuals who are similar to each other tend to form longer lasting relationships. So that one might not be as counterintuitive as others. So another finding that you think might be somewhat obvious is that the more you see a stimulus, the more you like it. But a more counterintuitive finding would be the more that you see a stimulus or an object that you aren't aware of, also the more you like it. So it's not necessarily the case where you have to be aware of an object or a person that you're seeing in order to like it more after seeing it multiple times. You can end up liking things more that you aren't aware that you're actually seeing. So these could be objects that are subliminally presented to you, or objects that are just slightly out of your direct gaze. Another obvious finding that you may think of is that individuals can report why they feel the way they feel about certain things or certain people. Well, generally we find that that is true, but sometimes we find that that's not true. We find that individuals often cannot correctly report why they feel the way that they do about a certain person or a product. So, example of this that I think we're going to be talking about later in the quarter is that when people are subliminally presented with words that are supposed to put people in a certain mindset, such as ocean or moon, people tend to report that their favorite laundry detergent is Tide. That's probably not too surprising that we see subliminally presented images or objects or words influencing behavior. But then people tend to give reasons other than the subliminally presented objects as for why they like Tide, such as, well, their parents used it, or that's just the brand that they always buy. And we tend to see that this is occurring far above the chance that these people are actually big fans of Tide. We see that people who are presented these subliminal words tend to report Tide, and people who aren't presented these words tend to not report Tide. So we do see that the manipulation is effective, but people tend to justify their behaviors and give reasons why they're behaving in the way they do, but these reasons aren't always correct. And generally we see that a lot of these findings that we're going to be talking about, or other situational cues, can determine how we behave and how we act in certain situations. And unfortunately, these cues can be used for evil. We can think about some of the subliminal messaging or some of the social influence research that we're going to be talking about has been used on Nazi commanders in World War II. People behaving in ways that they otherwise wouldn't behave given what the behaviors that they're performing, such as murders and other espionage. But they perform these behaviors. Why is that the case? We can think of the Abu Ghraib situation, and specifically we can talk about the Stanford prison experiment. People behaving in ways that they otherwise wouldn't, but given the situation, they are performing these very evil and nasty behaviors. And probably all of you are familiar with Milgram's studies on obedience, the giving shocks to another participant because they're not answering questions right. People wouldn't ordinarily give people shocks that could possibly kill them, but they tend to follow through with these behaviors because of the specific situation that they're in. So situation is an extremely powerful influence on behavior, and we're going to be delving into these influences over the course of the quarter. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will see you later.